This Kirblog topic was suggested by Lepreday. If you'd like to suggest topics for videos like these, and if you want to hear me record them in my community Discord server before they release, consider supporting me on Patreon at patreon.com/Kirbifer. And all because you voted on this Kirblog, so it's just for you, this Kirblog. I can't believe that this is a topic I've never covered before, weirdly. But today, we're going to talk about my childhood obsession with collecting things. Lepreday asked for this month's topic, aside from video games, do you collect any anime/game merch like figures, plushies, etc.? Any merch you own with cool backstories like your Bowser and Meta Knight plushies, or any merch you want but don't own? So, bless my wonderful, wonderful, giving, loving parents who absolutely spoiled me rotten on this. And let me preface with this. I've talked about this many times, including some of the ones that I've had dear old Kerba Dad on before. My parents divorced when I was very young, probably around like 5 or 6 years old. And they were, very, very mature about how they handled it, and especially not having it negatively impact me. And so my time was split between my parents, and kind of as part of that, because they wanted to keep me as happy as possible, they spoiled me quite a bit, especially when it came to buying me stuff. So because of that, I was incredibly, incredibly privileged that I was able to collect a lot of things. Not every kid is so fortunate to be able to do that. So I want to acknowledge that. And also I should stress, we were not rich by any means, but, my mom and dad both worked super, super hard, as did my step-parents as well, who I both love. And, so we were well off enough that they could afford such things in the first place. And so I want to acknowledge that I had that privilege in the first place. I know that probably some people are going to look at this and be like, oh, you rich asshole, you had like all this whatever shit that you collected for a billion years. If people feel that way, I don't blame them for that, I guess, but nonetheless, it was something that it was not just as black and white as like, oh, let's buy him another toy and just to shut him up or whatever. It was also actually something that, particularly with my dad and I specifically, it was a bonding experience kind of thing. And I'll go into the specifics of that. And not to say that, again, my mom and my two step parents as well didn't also contribute tremendously to this, but this and actually it even starts technically before that, when my mom and dad were still together when I was very, very young, because my very first collecting obsession, and this is probably not going to be a tremendous surprise to certain people that know me really well by this point, but it was Thomas the Tank Engine. It was it was the first show that I watched as a kid that I was a big fan of, before I had any real brain power to process storytelling or anything in depth. But, the stories were simple and easy to understand. The characters were bright and colorful and simplistic and memorable. I would say that they still are. And I would say that a lot of those stories still hold up very well, especially from the original books and everything. And, so and I loved the characters so much, I was obsessed with them, hyper fixated on them, you could say. And so that was the first sort of consistent toy that both my mom and my dad would buy me on a regular basis, which was, there were 2 series of Thomas the Tank Engine toy lines that I was a big collector of for, gosh, probably like, I want to say like 8 or 9 years, like the first like, maybe even up to 10 years old, honestly, because I still liked and somewhat followed Thomas for like a decent while, even by the time I was out of the general sort of age demographic, and, for whatever it is to admit that, I guess. But the 2 series, I even had to look up what the metal trains were. It was a line called, I think it was ERTL. They were these little metallic trains that they had tracks and playsets for, but I wasn't really interested in those. It was more so just collecting the characters, and they made models of tons and tons of characters, including a lot of ones that had not come out in the show yet, or at least maybe the episodes had not aired in the US yet. And they also had some characters that I think had only been in the books and they were never in the animated or the series, the TV series with the model trains and then eventually CG. There were God, and I wish I could remember their names. There were these two characters in particular that were twins, kind of like Bill and Ben, but they were like these purple steam engines, and they had like faces in the front like most Thomas characters, and then they had like faces in their back, like in their like another face like kind of grafted on their caboose. They were kind of disturbing and freakish looking, but I thought they were kind of cool. And because they were not characters in the TV show, I was like, oh, they're like exclusive, cool, whatever. I don't know. And I collected those for a really, really long time as I moved around, you know, in a couple of different places that I lived in throughout my childhood and everything. And then another series that I had was, and this was also quite, probably, I think ultimately more popular than the metal ones I'm talking about, was a series of Thomas toys called Brio, which were wooden trains. They had some metallic parts and some plastic parts. Like the faces were plastic molds, and the wheels as well, I think. And then some of the mechanical parts. And they had magnets on the front and back of each of them, including like if it was like, say, like a steam engine that had like a tender or two, you know, that would be like a separate attachment behind it, and they would have like, oh, you could collect like, you know, freight cars and lumber trucks and whatever, you know, that kind of stuff, and you can connect them together with the magnets that are behind them. And unlike the metal ERTL sets, I was interested in collecting the actual playset stuff, so I had these wooden train tracks that I would use to build, you know, like my own little versions of the island of Sodor and everything, and I would, you know, make my own little stories and things. And that was by the time I was beginning to get into, like, I guess, quote-unquote darker storytelling, so then I started infusing, like, you know, supernatural elements and things into the stories I was telling. It was a little weird. You know, like I said, this came from the fact that I was into Thomas longer than, you know, but then again, I've seen Tobias and the Half Pariah, and I realized I was not alone. Look that up. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, please go look that up and be amazed by yeah, and one particular kind of memory that I had of playing with those. So when I started playing a lot more video games and into the late 90s, like mid to late 90s, I was really big into Star Fox 64, and that was kind of at the tail end of my Thomas obsession, but because by the time that the Thomas movie, The Magic Railway, came out, I was out of the series, but I still went to go see that because I wanted to see the Thomas movie finally. But at the tail end of my actual, like, being into Thomas and collecting the toys, and also the VHS tapes, I'll get into collecting shows too, but that's that was the first series that I was avidly collecting videotapes for, was the Thomas series back in the day, and that was collecting mostly the Ringo Starr and George Carlin narrated episodes at the time. But I remember there was a time where I was so obsessed with Star Fox 64 that I had like a Star Fox team of, I'm assuming it was probably like, I don't know, like Thomas, James, Percy, and someone else, I can't remember, and I just had them fly around like as if they had like jetpacks. Like, and they were shooting things up. I was flying them around like they were R-Wings, which is the stupidest thing in the world. But that was the last, like, thing I remember doing with those toys at all. I think I would have been still in my single digits at that age. So that was where my mind went at that point. But and something worth mentioning, and this is the kind of bonding experience part of it. So that was the early days of, as my dad and I have talked many times about on the ones he's done with me, we would go on a quest. Now, a little bit different from, say, like the Pokemon stuff, which I'm going to get to that in a little while. It wasn't so much that we would always go looking for specific things. What we usually do is, if, say, my mom or my dad needed to go to New York City, which at the time I hated going to because it was just like, you know, wading through a fucking cloud of cigarette smoke for, you know, however many hours in a day. But we would always stop by FAO Schwartz, which was this big, I think it's still around, but it's this big toy store in New York City. I think it I don't remember, but I think it might have predated the giant Toys R Us that I also don't think is up anymore. That was in like Times Square or something. But I remember we would always go there, and we would just go to the Thomas section, which was gigantic. I don't know if it's as big anymore. Maybe it is. It probably is in certain toy stores, but and also it probably just felt gigantic because I was a tiny child. But we'd go there, and it was just like the most magical fucking thing in the world is to see like just Thomas stuff everywhere. So we would just go, and I would like, grab a character or two, and if it was a Brio thing, if I wanted to get like, some of the train track sets or something, I'd get some of those and add it to the collection accumulatively. And I think sometimes we go to other places, but usually it was that FAO Schwartz in New York City that we go to and just stock up on something Thomas related, like maybe a couple times a year or something. And I slowly added to the collection over that time. And there was also, if I'm remembering right, and some of you guys know this location because I've talked about it many times, but it was the park in downtown Northport where I did the Balancing Act thesis film that I did for SVA. Near that area in Long Island, there was this little specialty toy store that would carry some of those ERTL Thomas characters that, and I remember, I think that even that was one of the places where I found, they had toys of characters that hadn't come out on the show yet or were never in the show. That was a very distinct memory that I had of like just searching around different places if I'd ever see any of them, at some point. So yeah, so that was the first major thing that I was big into collecting. In between a lot of these different kind of collecting obsessions, there were different points where I was big into collecting Disney stuff from different movies. It was not like extensive, some of them more so than others. I remember having quite a few Aladdin toys for a while. I had quite a few Lion King toys, some of the action figures that they had of that at the time. I think I might even still have like a Simba thing like somewhere, like maybe I like bought it at like, one of the toy stores that are out here that just like carries random shit in LA. And I remember, I think I had mentioned a few times that Toy Story and A Bug's Life were the two Pixar movies that I had a big obsession with collecting a bunch of the character toys for that. But they were not nearly as much as like some of the other, franchises that it was like a really, really hyper fixation for, you know what I mean? Yeah, so but that's worth mentioning, like in between a lot of these different ones. But the next really, 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 really major one that I'll never ever forget, and good Lord, I genuinely feel kind of bad how much like of this we collected, but for just how much money my poor fucking parents must have spent on. But Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, way back, the original first generation that was brought to the US was it was it was an epidemic, just the obsession that every kid in America and probably beyond had with that series. And I remember very distinctly I had what felt like almost everything from that first line. Like, my God, it was insanity. I had everything from, the figures of the Rangers themselves were like, you would flip their heads and they would swap between like the real actors that were portraying them at the time. And I remember, I think I even had different ones for when Jason, Trini, and Zach, and then eventually they got swapped out for Rocky, Aisha, and I almost said Johnny because Johnny on Bosch, Lamau, Adam. I think I had those as well. So I had those. I had countless of the what's it called, the evil space aliens, the monsters of the week that Rita. I weirdly enough never had a toy of Rita Repulsa. I'm sure they probably made one, but I never had one, oddly enough. So yeah, I just but I had like a ton of the monsters. I had all the Megazords. I think I had some of like the life size, or semi life size for a kid probably. The weapons, like I had the sword and the bow and the daggers and all that stuff that the Zoo Ranger, the Dinosaur Sentai team had, that was adapted into Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. I had those. And then eventually when they started switching to the different generations, but they were still keeping the Mighty Morphin like characters, I had the White Ranger, I had the Tiger Zord, I had the Thunder Zords, I had the Ninja and Shogun Megazords from the later stuff. I don't think I collected the other Rangers by that point. I don't think I had the Alien Rangers. I don't think I had, Zeo or Turbo. I had stopped, like even watching the show around Turbo, but I collected a whole ton of that stuff. And I had, I remember very distinctly, I had this giant, duffel bag. And once again, it felt a lot bigger than I'm sure it was because, again, I was a tiny child, and it was kept up in our attic in the childhood home that I lived in. Actually, where I think I'd mentioned Allie, my sister Allie, who was on Pete and Pete. She lived in the attic upstairs because they just turned it into a cool room for her. But I think that up there at some point I kept that duffel bag of all the Power Ranger stuff that I had up there. And I did collect also, because I mentioned the Ninja Megazord stuff, I had a lot of the stuff from the movie that was collected as well. So some of the movie exclusive, characters and designs and, some of that kind of stuff. But I remember one of the products that they made during that time was Ivan's Ooze. Ivan Ooze, who was the villain, the movie exclusive villain of that production. He had this silly putty purple goop stuff that he used to, possess the minds of all the adults and stuff into, in Angel Grove to make them his slaves, and then, all this stuff. And he was trying to revive his ancient, mecha, characters that he was using at the end of the movie. So they sold Ivan's Ooze as an actual product. It was just like a goopy, silly putty, except it had less of a how do I describe this? It was not as thick or gummy of a consistency as something like a silly putty. It was just slime, and it was kept in a not very secure plastic container of the goop. And I'll never forget one fateful day, and I don't know how it happened, but it happened. I opened up my duffel bag, and the plastic container was cracked apart, and all of my Power Ranger toys that I had collected for, I don't know, probably about 3-4 years by that point, were just absolutely, for lack of a better term, bukkake'd in purple. So that was a horrifying sight. I might have screeched. They might have heard me from 3 floors up in the attic. So that was, that was awful. That was a very bad day for Christopher, and a lot of those toys were ruined. I don't even know if we ever attempted to try to, wash them off. I think a lot of them were just ruined, and I might have even years later just straight up threw them out. I don't know. I might have thrown them out. I might have... I don't know. And I know that's horrible to think that I might have thrown out some of these things. Actually, and on that note, I should mention, I think that most of these collections, they are somewhere. I don't know where they are, but they're somewhere. But the Power Ranger stuff, I think might be just gone. I think it might be lost to time, unfortunately, which is a bummer, because I'm sure probably if I had some of that stuff salvaged, maybe I could make $1 or $2 off of that. But yeah, that was a bummer. But I do remember actually my dad and I, going back to Kirbadad again, he and I filmed some home movie type things that we made with the Power Ranger toys, where I was kind of making my own shitty episodes. I distinctly remember, and I'm sure you can look this up if you search Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Command Center playset. That has Zordon in the center of it, and it came with an Alpha 5 figure and stuff. I definitely filmed crappy do-it-yourself episodes. They weren't even stop motion or anything like that. I also distinctly remember, I'm going to tell this story real quick because I'll never tell it otherwise. So after I filmed the actual segment of the characters, what's it called? The characters, performing whatever the episode was or and all that. I had a section of it later where where it was me on camera talking about my association with the Power Rangers and how because I was for some reason I was like, yeah, I'm a veterinarian, thinking that I'm a veteran. No. I think I said I'm a vegetarian, is what I said. And then I was like, no, I think I thought of it as in I was a veteran, like, as if I was like and I think at the time I thought that the word veteran, like, fucking meant something along the lines of like being like a seasoned like hero or warrior or something like that, not realizing that like it's like, no, it's someone who, I mean, in the sense of like if you're like an army veteran, I completely just misconstrued what it meant, and my dad had to educate me like, no, you're thinking veteran, Chris, not vegetarian, and also that's not what that means. But that's a weird like specific memory. But I was like, I am I'm a vegetarian, and as such, my duty is to work with the Power Rangers. And I'm like, this is on video somewhere in my house for eventual blackmail material if anyone ever breaks into that into some storage and uses that to destroy me. Now that I've described it in full, detail, but nonetheless. So yeah, Power Rangers, that was the next, major obsession. Ended in psychosis, I guess you could say. I think that I want to say the Shogun Megazord was the last one that I was like collecting. Yeah, because no, you know what? Hold on, I'm looking at the Zeo Megazord. I think that I did have that. That does look somewhat familiar. So that might have been the last one that I got at the time. But I think that by that point I was slowly getting out of collecting the toys, and I was slowly getting out of watching the show as well. So, over time, I just kind of grew out of that, and I'm like, yeah, I think I'm kind of done with this at this point. So, but of special mention. So this is not necessarily like a major collecting thing, but it eases nicely into the next one, and it is still an important one to me on a personal note, which was my obsession with Nintendo stuff. So I did collect quite a few games. I had a small handful of NES games and Super Nintendo games, and then collected a lot of N64 games. I still have my N64 cartridge collection. I actually brought that here to LA with me a few years ago because I would always try to bring something back with me when I would go to visit home and everything. So. And in the midst of that, I was big into Mario and Kirby and all that stuff, growing up for a long time, and Donkey Kong Country and all that stuff. But there was very little merchandise of Nintendo stuff that I could find. It's not like now where if you go into any Target or Walmart or something, you'll find, so many different like figures and play sets and, Lego stuff and all these different things. There was little to none of that back in the day. It existed, like there was Nintendo merch, but I could never find any. But I'll never forget one day, one fateful day, that my dad and we stopped inside of a 7-Eleven for some reason, which we wouldn't often go to. We just like happened to go inside. And at the 7-Eleven, I walked in and they had a group of Nintendo character plushies. And I'm even going to look up the exact ones that I remember seeing. It was 4 characters. And it was, I think that also at the time, you could have, you could also order them from, Nintendo Power Magazine, if I'm not mistaken. Because I remember later they sold exclusively a Princess Peach plushie that I never saw in stores. Now you can walk into Nintendo World and there's a million of them, obviously, anywhere really you could find them. But the first 4 that I remember seeing, it was Mario with the wing cap from Mario 64 on specifically, Yoshi, Donkey Kong, and Bowser. It was those 4 specifically I remember, and immediately we just bought them all. We just immediately snatched them up. The second set of 4 of them that I remember as well was Diddy Kong, Luigi, Toad, and Wario. I believe that I still have all 8 of those plushies. I still have them to this day. I did find out later they made like kind of miniature versions of them, and I think even giant versions of a couple of them too, because I'd seen them later. They made different colored versions of Yoshi, which was I think to tie in with Yoshi's Story at the time. They did also make Banjo-Kazooie and Mumbo Jumbo, which I flipped my shit over. I remember grabbing those. I think, actually, I might have even possibly ordered those off of the Nintendo Power magazine, like store, like the magazine store that you could order like stuff from or whatever. But that was where I finally got my little buddy Bowser plushie that many of you are very familiar with from videos that I've done with him and on TikTok and stuff like that. And he's in my room right over there right now. I can look over into my closet and see him hanging out with Reagan on top of my some of the few manga volumes that I have over here and everything. So yeah, and because and it's weird because I loved Bowser like before that. But I think that it was getting that plushie specifically that just made me have such an attachment to him. And that was also where, and I'm sure I've talked about this before, but I just decided, I thought it would be funny that and it's so fitting, again, this whole like the voice acting, obsession that I had later. But knowing that the Mario characters were like putting on a performance and they're actually just like, they're not really like doing the things that they're doing. They're just like having fun, and like the games are really just like them performing for the player as like a thing, and then they go karting on weekends or whatever. I thought it would be funny if Bowser's real voice was like this. If we had like kind of a battle voice. This is before Milk Rod was a thing. And I was like, this is my real voice, and I just I go and then they'll put it down and it goes. Oh, no, that's really how the real goes. This is long before like Sunshine happened. I didn't like, at the time, I didn't like King Koopa in the cartoon, so I was like, that's not my Bowser, they don't even call him that, I hate it. Even though, rest in peace, Harvey Atkin was a fantastic voice for Bowser, even though they called him King Koopa in that show, which was still also accurate. It was a valid name to call him, so technically. Nonetheless, yeah, that Bowser was my little buddy, and I remember, very embarrassingly so, I think that every single day of the school year in 5th grade, I brought that Bowser plushie with me to school. It was probably not something I should have done for a myriad of reasons. Literally, I think the point that I look back on now of just like, all right, maybe you should have not, was I snuck him into like my my yearbook picture for the 5th grade. I'm like, what are you doing, Chris? Like, seriously? But I think everyone kind of had the idea of like, yeah, he's a disturbed child. Just let him do his thing. Like, whatever. He's got problems upstairs, I think. So, but yeah. And then very quickly after that, I'm like, I think it's time to stop. But yeah. And that's also around the same time that I had come up with what eventually became, and maybe some of you might be semi-familiar with this from my DeviantArt or my Tumblr, the concept of a show concept that I later developed that was called Game Savers, which has gone through different names by now, but it was the idea of Bowser and Donkey Kong and Mewtwo and these other Nintendo villains reforming and joining like a task force, like a secret task force, like to fight like bigger threats or whatever. And, Brawny was the character that kind of spawned out of my idea of making Bowser like a sympathetic character, which is so funny because now everybody finds Bowser to be a sympathetic character. And that probably went hand in hand with him, like, getting to be sort of a good guy in Mario RPG, which would have been around that same time, so it was all kind of playing into each other. But so even though that wasn't like, like an avid, collection because there wasn't a lot to collect, it was still a very important one, that meant a lot to me personally. To just have all those things. Now, on the other hand, on a similar note to collecting Nintendo shit, let me tell you about Pokemon. So, Pokemon hit, 97, I think, right? And, I, became obsessed pretty quickly, and it was obviously, of course, as we all know by now, Nintendo's and Creatures and Game Freak and what have you, their clever idea of having everything launched at once: the show, the cards, the games, the toys, everything all at once. And I bought all of it, like immediately. I remember one of my very first memories of just being obsessed with Pokemon when everybody had the cards. I made it my mission to go around and do anything I could to obtain cards of the 3 starters, all of which were common, completely common, but I just wanted I wanted to collect Charmander, Bulbasaur, and Squirtle as cards. Like, that was my first sort of mission, was doing that. Then I've talked about this on many different Pokemon Kirblogs before. In fact, probably also collecting the stuff that I'm about to talk about. But I saw the show, and then I got obsessed with that, and then I played the games, and then I was collecting the cards. And the cards became kind of a typical thing. I mean, everybody did for a time. I'm sure most people that were Pokemon fans at some point collected the cards, even if they didn't play the game. I went through the era of when the coveted holographic first edition Charizard from, the first line of Pokemon cards, the original, like, base set, that was my the coveted item that all children tried to fucking collect back at that point. I remember I actually had 2 of them, and I traded one of them for a Mew card because that was the last thing I needed to collect all 150 of the first Pokemon. I think that by the time that the base set, the jungle set, and the fossil set were out, I think that the first 151 Pokemon were all collectible as cards. And so I got each of them in card form. And I did collect some of the Team Rocket and Gym Leader stuff, and maybe even some. Yeah, I collected the first 2 generations of Pokemon in card form. I had all the creatures in card form collected at some point. Some of those I have since sold, because when I learned that some of them were worth a decent amount of money, I was like, I don't mind giving those up. But I did have a big fat binder with a crappy, pencil sketch I did of like Blastoise and Charizard on it, with all my cards collected in it. And I did go up until, I think probably shortly before Gen 3 started, because as I've mentioned many times, Gen 3 made me fall out of love with Pokemon for a little bit, which, sorry to those of you who are Gen 3 fans. I appreciate it now, especially because of Oros. But yeah, and on a similar note, okay, here was the big one. Other than obviously the cards, we did collect the VHS tapes for the first season of the show. I have all of Pokemon Season 1 collected on VHS and DVD. The only other show that I have collected like that is Yu Yu Hakusho on both VHS, DVD, and Blu-ray, because I'm an insane person. But nonetheless, my big Pokemon collecting obsession that Dad and I were way into was collecting the 2-inch Pokemon figures. That was the big thing that we did. Now, at the beginning, they launched quite a few of them. I don't remember exactly how many there were to start with when everything was first coming out, but there were a lot of them. And over the course of the first few years of the series, they were continuing to release the first 151 in, various packs. There were like, packs of like 2 of them that would come together. There were packs of 1 of them at a time. There were packs that like if you bought like a figure of one of the human characters, it would come with a Pokemon. There were like big packs that had like 5 Pokemon in one, these little 2-inch figures and everything. But I had a lot of those collected at the time. And my dad and I also, that was really the beginning of like questing around for stuff when I say that, because we went to every store you could possibly imagine. We went to Toys R Us, we went to Target, we went to like specialty like Japanese toy shops and stuff, where the same place where we actually found, and I regret not buying this, but it was a fan subbed VHS tape of Pokemon the first movie before it came out in the US that I really wish that I had bought just for the novelty of it back then. But we had, we would go there, we would find, like certain ones that were hard to find at the time. And we just kept going and going until we collect them all. And then, kind of in tandem with by the time that Gen 2 was starting and they were releasing figures of a few of the Gen 2 Pokemon as well, I do recall that there was a big pivotal moment where we found this gentleman on, I think he was from Korea possibly, but he was a guy, I think he went by like Sponghek was like the name that I very vaguely remember off of, I think it was either eBay or maybe some other kind of like shop website that Dad found where people were selling Pokemon figures. And he had a bunch of other figures, particularly ones that we were trying to collect that were ones that had not officially released in the US yet. And a weird thing that I remember particularly about that is the fact that, and this was so strange to me. So little offshoot, but this is related to this. Beckett Collector Magazine, which, funnily enough, fellow voice actor John Allen, if any of you guys know of him, he he used to write for that magazine way, 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 way back in the day, and he he sorry, not about John, but in Pokemon, in the Pokemon Beckett Collector Magazine, which was mainly about the cards, but they had stuff about other Pokemon things in general. They had these little crappy like illustrations that they made of some of the Pokemon that the Gen 2 Pokemon that weren't out yet, based on how the sprites looked. So I remember in particular there was this really gross looking in a version of Celebi that was like somebody's bad interpretation of what it looked like based on the sprite art of Celebi from like the original Gold and Silver. And it was just like this horrifying looking, like its mouth was like a little button nose. It was just very gross. But I remember seeing figures of those like bad misinterpretations of them on this website. So I think that they were, later I realized, oh, these were bootlegs. These were absolutely a bunch of fucking bootlegs. Like there's no way, you know? So we realized that we did, in fact, like buy some crappy versions of some of them, unfortunately. But the nice thing was, then however many years later, when they launched, the Pokemon Center, which eventually became the Nintendo Center, which eventually became, you know, Nintendo New York, the store, we walked in and at the first floor, right, like by the cash register, we see my dad and I walk in and we see this giant fucking wall with all 251 of the Pokemon that had been released to the public by that time in individual figure form. And we were like, we win. It's over. And we just, in the next couple visits to the city, we then basically proceeded to go there and buy a handful of them. And we just got the rest of them and completed that collection. Shortly after that, they did start to release the what's it called? The Gen 3 Pokemon, and I did collect a few of those. I think I at least had the starters and maybe like Lotad and a couple other ones. But because that was in tandem with not enjoying collecting, or I was not into Pokemon Gen 3, unfortunately. That was when I officially stopped collecting that stuff. And that was also basically the end of collecting. And actually, you know what? I'll even say this too, kind of in tandem with that, with the Gen 3 stuff. That also marked the end of me trying to collect all of the Pokemon games, because up until that point, I collected every single individual Pokemon game ever made. Even the spin-offs, even like, I think the one exception was like Pokemon Mini. I didn't collect those because I kind of didn't count those, but I had like, you know, Puzzle League and Puzzle Challenge and Snap and, you know, all that stuff and all the spin-offs and all the individual versions. I had, you know, red, blue, yellow, you know, gold, silver, crystal. I bought Ruby and I gave my copy of Sapphire to somebody else. I bought Emerald and I don't even think I played it. And then I'm reminded Pokemon Channel and Pokemon Box. I was like, I give up. I'm done. I don't care. You've lost me. I had Hey You Pikachu and I was like, I'm not enjoying this game at all. But I own it because it's a Pokemon game. And I was like, yeah, I'm done. So yeah, Emerald was the last one that I collected like fully. And again, no offense to people that love the Gen 3 stuff. It's just that was it for me. And then again, it wasn't until I got on the show and then Heart Gold and Soul Silver came out and then I was back in. And then, you know, now I love Pokemon just as much, if not more, you know, than I did previously. So that was just that little dip that happened at that point. But yeah, so that was a big thing again for my dad and I, because we went around everywhere on quests, you know, all over New York basically to find these things. And still to this day, that actually is a very coveted piece of my collection. Is I have those first 2 generations of Pokemon fully collected. I have like this one kind of like collector's suitcase that has dividers with each of the different types of every Pokemon in each of them. And then I also have just a big box that has all of the Gen 2 Pokemon in it, including I have these giant figures that were like about 3 times as big as the usual ones of Ho-Oh and Lugia that I remember they had at the time. They might have made the little 2-inch ones later for for what's it called, for Lugia and Ho-Oh, like maybe later on, but at the time they were like these bigger ones that I thought were super super cool. So I managed to get those, and so that was a complete collection that I thought was worth the time and investment into, and I still have them to this day. So. Moving into the early 2000s, this was kind of the last, I guess, toy collecting obsession that I had before I was pretty much done. And again, in the midst of this, oh, you know what? A couple other little like runner-up ones that I'll mention that were not like, major, big obsessive collections that I had. But I'm reminded I definitely had my fair share of Transformers. I was really big into Armada at the time, so I remember having like Optimus Prime and Sideways and Megatron and a few of those, just the ones that I thought were cool, and also ones that I wanted to play pretend with and play with at home and stuff. Actually, going back, funnily enough, I should have mentioned this one. Again, wasn't a huge obsession, but I did collect quite a few of the TY Beanie Babies back in the day. There's a whole sack of them that I think I might still have them somewhere, but I had a whole bunch of those, some of which actually might be pretty rare now. I should actually go back and see if I could even maybe make a buck or two off of those. But, I remember, having a lot of them and playing with them at my childhood babysitter's house where, I created the name Kerbifer when I was 12. So I had a bunch of those. Some ones that were big favorites of mine. I had Patty the Platypus, I think her name was, the purple platypus, who is like one of the classic kind of staple ones. I had the Red Bull character whose name I'm forgetting. I had Panama, who was this kind of cool looking like tree frog with the big bulgy eyes. Bunch of other ones. I think I had the Princess Diana, like purple bear one that was like a special edition thing. Excuse me. And I had I think like 20 of them. I also had a few of the McDonald's, like the miniature ones, the teeny beanie babies. Teeny beanie. I remember, if anybody remembers that jingle. On that same note, speaking of McDonald's, I did collect, and this will lead into the next the major one that I had. I did for a few times. I collected a number of the McDonald's toy lines. There were a few where I was like, yeah, you know what? I think I'm going to try to actually collect all of these, which became a little bit easier when I was an adult. But also by the time I was an adult, I didn't really give much of a shit about collecting them because I realized that they were mostly really crappy quality for the most part. So I was like, I don't really need to be doing this anymore. But and it's funny, even actually, Michaela Toxic Soul was going around to a bunch of McDonald's in Canada recently, because I guess Canada and Europe have a Yu-Gi-Oh! Cross Sanrio tie-in that I don't think is over here in the US. So it's like Sanrio characters dressed up as Yu-Gi-Oh! Like Duel Monsters and stuff. And and they're already selling out like fucking crazy everywhere, which is funny. But there was a time, a weird memory, and I don't know what I was on when I did this, but there was a time where McDonald's had like a tie-in with Furby, and they had just like a million different Furbies. And I had one just because I had it, but I never liked it. I never liked Furbies. That moment from Mitchell's versus the Machines, where they have like the crazy Furbies and stuff, that was like what I always wanted like Toy Story 2 to be, was just like a Furby going apeshit and him being the bad guy that had to get out of the fucking house or whatever. I I collected like a whole bunch of those, and I just one day I looked at them and I'm like, why did I buy all of these? What is wrong with me? Why did I collect like 800 different colored fucking Furbies? I'm an idiot. So that was not a good idea. I also tried to collect, there was a, what's it called? There was a Disney's Tarzan toy tie-in. That weird thing, I didn't like the actual toys that they came with, but each of the toys also came with a piece of an island that I thought looked like a cool sort of world map that I just wanted to assemble. So that was one in particular I was just trying to collect the individual pieces of the toys because I just wanted to build the Tarzan Island or whatever. I didn't care about the actual like character or figures that came with it or whatever. I think I just wanted that as just like a thing to have as like a cool looking sort of map screen or whatever. It was very silly. But I think I maybe even only got like 2 or 3 of the pieces, and that was about it. Yeah, that was one. So anyway, and one particular McDonald's tie-in thing that I tried desperately to get all of and was not able to, and was only able to complete by going on to eBay later on, and this leads into it nicely, the Bionicle Matoran Villagers. Bionicle Generation 1 was my final toy-based obsession. Bionicle, each set sold separately. So, yeah, I think I remember seeing them in like magazines or something, and I'm like, whoa, those are fucking sick. I want those. And sure enough, every opportunity I had, I ended up, just buying something at a toy store. I remember, I think a couple Christmases in a row, I had like quite a few Bionicle things all gifted to me. I remember continually trying to get each of the Toa, each visit that I had. So I had everything. I had the 6 Toa. I had the 6 elders. I'm forgetting what their names, what the actual like name of the elder, characters were. I had the 6 Matoran, which were the villagers, like Takua and Jowler and all them. I eventually had to find the remaining ones off of eBay because I think I only got 2 of them from McDonald's at the time. I had all of the Rahi, which were the like possessed evil animals that Makuta had turned gone crazy or whatever. So I had a bunch of those. I had all of those actually. I remember constructing a bunch of them. I had what the hell were those? They're like these praying mantis looking motherfuckers that you would like press the thing on the back and they'd have like a little punchy kind of like punch 1 2 1 2 like punchy motion. I had those. I had this other one that was like a giant like beast that would like you'd press the thing and it would go it would like chomp its whole entire body forward. I had all those. And I think some of the things that the Matoran would like ride on or whatever, like the crab thing or some of those things or whatever, maybe it was a vehicle or something. I had a bunch of those. And then I think when they switched to the Generation 2 stuff where the Toa got like reformatted into the what's it called? The Toa something, like they got like new versions of their masks and their bodies became more updated. It's the way that they looked in the Mask of Light movie. I got those 6 and I got a figure of Makuta because I needed to have Makuta and he looked fantastic. That was it. That was when I was like, I'm out. And I remember distinctly the reason, 2 things. One, by the time Generation 2 happened, I was like, all right, I'm already out of love with Bionicle. The video game took 800 years and never came out. And then the one GBA game I had sucked ass. And then by the time that Mask of Light came out, that was kind of like the Thomas situation where I'm like, well, I'm not into Bionicle anymore, but I'll buy this because I want to see what the Bionicle movie was going to be. So I got it. But it was the masks. I was a fucking crazy person and actually thought that I could be able to collect every single one of the masks. I really, really thought I could collect, and just to clarify about what I mean by that. So each of the 6 Toa had their different individual masks that were unique to them, right? And then there were, so it was red, black, green, blue, white, and brown, those 6. And each of those different shaped masks, each came in those different 6 colors. So like Tahu's mask, the red one, which I think was like, what was the fucking like power of that one? I think it was like laser vision or something. I can't remember. But like, so there was like the laser vision shaped mask in all 6 of those colors. And like Pohatu, who is the brown one, could only wear the brown one. And then there were the gold and silver versions of each of the masks that had all of the powers, and they were like specifically for each of those individual Bionicles, each of the Toa. And there were the what's it called? There were the fucking the elder. I keep forgetting what they're called, but the elder masks, which were also 6 sort of like off colors of each of those. It was like the same 6 colors, but kind of like a lighter version of them. And there were the 6 different colored versions of each of those and shit. So, and I tried, kids. They literally had like booster packs of the masks with different assortments of different things. And I actually tried to collect all of them. And I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? There's nothing that's actually making, I was just swept up by the craze of collecting. And that's all it was. And I was like, this is stupid and I need to stop doing this. So, but the last kind of special memory that I'll share about collecting the Bionicle stuff in general was I remember there was a time where I was trying to sort of modify my Toa. But by the time that I was like, I don't have the OCD of trying to keep everything exactly as it is, I actually tried taking the pieces of the individual characters that I had and modifying them into different characters and different things to do with them. So the playing pretend with my action figures thing that I did for a while, that was kind of the basis of that Game Savers thing I mentioned. There were 2 like unique characters that I created as a result of that. One of them was, actually sort of technically 3 of them, was I had Yin and Yang, which were just like a modified version of Kopaka and Onua, which were the white and black Toas, and I tried to make them like yin yang themed. And when they would fuse together, they would become Zentity, which was like a half white, half black version of them. And I think that even one of my friends like modded his version into the Zentity, so we could have both of them like just ready to do that at the same time. And then the other one, this is actually kind of a funny Tome thing. Some of you might know of a character that never saw the light of day in any incarnation of Tome. It was a character that was named Zira. It was this kind of Xbox-themed looking kind of like virus girl, right? That was meant to be the final opponent, or one of the final opponents from from TTA. And then I never had the opportunity or any kind of thing like that to do like a version of it in Tome 2011 or the Tome RPG. But I created this like Xbox virus character. It was when the Xbox was new and it was meant to be like the ultimate enemy to like the Nintendo and PlayStation and Sega worlds at the time, with that old sort of version of what the Game Savers, Bowser plot was and everything. So I made it as this final enemy opponent to go against. And it was a combination of Onua and Liwa, which of course, were the black and green Bionicles. So I crafted this weird like hodgepodge kind of monster out of that. And that was the last sort of creative thing that I did with that. And then by the time that we got to the end, I was, all right, I'm done with Bionicle and I'm done with just collecting this stuff and being obsessed with that. So but that was a fun little thing that I did with those characters at the time. And they were very, very fucking cool toys. So, and I'm still sad that like they're still kind of not really doing anything with Bionicle anymore. And I really wish that they would, to be honest. Maybe someday, who knows? I think it's cool that those fans are kind of trying to rebuild the video game from scratch again with like the beta build that was never, that was leaked somewhere, whatever the fuck it was. But yeah, so that was my last toy collecting obsession. And then the last little thing I'll mention was collecting DVDs and videos and series and movies and stuff like that. There were quite a few that I had, quite a few. And I do recall specifically that other than the ones I've mentioned already, like, Thomas and Pokemon and everything, I had quite a few of the VHS story arcs of DBZ, the old Funimation stuff, where the VHS tapes would connect together and make a picture, like if it was an individual, like, the Majin Buu saga and the Perfect Cell saga and the Great Saiyaman saga and all that stuff. That was all the individual tapes would line up and make like a picture that was like a screenshot from an episode or something, and I collected a lot of those. So I had a bunch of those episodes at the time, and I had a lot of Yu Yu Hakusho. I had the entirety of Yu Yu Hakusho. I have all season 1 of Yu Yu Hakusho. I have on VHS, DVD, and Blu-ray, and the rest of the series I have on the original DVD releases. I have the Dark Tournament collected in 2 box sets, And then the Chapter Black and the Demon World arcs I have in the individual, like 3 episodes a pop DVDs. Kids, you don't know how well you have it now with not only streaming, but, box sets of full seasons and series of things. Back then, Jesus H. Christ Almighty, all we had was like 3 or 4 episodes a pop on VHS tapes or on DVDs. So similarly, I was big into collecting Inuyasha for a while, and I had the first 3 seasons of Inuyasha collected with like 3 episodes a piece on them. And oh, dear God, they took up so much goddamn space in my house. And it was ridiculous. And then thank God now it's so easy to just like find entire seasons of shows on, like on streaming sites and like stuff like that, thankfully. And full box sets with tons and tons of episodes on them a piece. But I go vault. And I was collecting a lot of the One Piece DVDs for a time as well. I remember particularly when Funimation obviously started, releasing those. When I was in college, I was collecting them. I would always go to Best Buy and buy the newest box set and follow through from the beginning all the way up until Alabasta, and then catching up to where Skypiea was, although they had aired the edited version. In fact, actually, it's funny. I think I'd only seen the uncut versions of the Skypiea episodes very recently when I rewatched them with Michaela and German Courtney. And we're now into Water 7, which is now very nostalgic because I remember collecting the box sets of the Water 7 and CP9 stuff, when they started doing newer episodes again, all that time later. And then, thankfully, when they started putting the episodes on streaming sites and stuff, it became a lot easier to follow the dubbed episodes by that time. And I think they're on like Amazon and Crunchyroll now and all that kind of stuff, and Funimation at the time, rest in peace. And the final series that I collected from start to finish, and it was my way of collecting all of DBZ, was DBZ Kai. And I remember there was a time where actually a lot of the box sets were actually coming out before they were airing on TV. So I was able to watch a good chunk of the show on DVD before they were airing on Nicktoons, so I could see the uncut versions ahead of time, which was pretty cool, honestly. I was very appreciative that I got to do that. And then actually same thing with even when they were putting out the Majin Buu, the Dragon Ball Kai Final Chapters episodes. The DVD sets of that came out well ahead of when they were airing on TV. So I was able to get those. And I was very happy that, I think in total, I think it was, God, what? I think like there were 8 of everything up until the end of when Cell was defeated. I think there were 8 box sets of that. And then I think the Majin Buu stuff, I want to say was like 3 box sets, maybe something like that. Something like that, I think. So I had that, and I was very happy that I was like, oh, good, I finally have all of DBZ plus Battle of Gods and some of the movies and things, collected together on my shelf. They're all right there. And now, really the only things that I collect are something that are a little bit more on the personally meaningful side, which is merch of characters that I voice and stuff that I've been involved with. My little, in fact, maybe I'll even film a little video at the end, but I'll show you my collection of, all the stuff that I have, collected over time of, different characters that I've voiced and different things that I've worked on over the years, and, of Mob Psycho and Hunter x Hunter and Gundam and, shows that I and games that I worked on and stuff that I've directed and written for and all these different things. So, I'm very glad that now that's the type of stuff that I can collect, that it's kind of a mishmash of different things, with, the stuff that's directly related to, things that I've worked on, myself. And, that's something that's a little bit of a healthier, I guess, way of not spending a shit ton of money on a constant basis. So, but yeah, that's pretty much my story when it comes to collecting things. And, on that note, this was a lot of fun to talk about. So please, I would love to hear in the comments below, what are some of your stories about collecting stuff? different merchandise from different things. What were your hyperfixations? What are things that you have a complete collection of in terms of toys or paraphernalia or games or series, anything like that? Let me know. And once again, if you would like to contribute to suggesting topics like this, check me out on patreon.com/Kirbifer. And if you become a $10 or a Patreon patron, you can join our Discord server. We currently have Leopard A, whose idea it was to make this Kirblog topic in here with us, along with Viola Araragi and Joshua R. Hopper, who were listening in on this. Thanks, guys, for being here. And so this will probably be going up very soon. This is our April topic, and I'll see you in May for the next one. I've got a couple conventions I'm doing in May, Beaver State Comic Con and Palm Spring Convention, so keep an eye out for details on that. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and I will see you all in the next one. So have fun, take care, thanks so much, and I'll see you all later. Bye-bye!